Welcome everybody. We are going through The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and we are on the second part of chapter 9. Let me hand it over to Jason. The format is we're going to have a couple of readings, then Jason and Amon are going to go through their translation, and then we'll take comments just on those verses, focusing on the text. Today, after we're going to finish chapter 9, so we're going to have time to look back at chapter 1 through 9. So if you have any general comments, that would be a very good place to bring them up. All right, Jason, shall we have some readings? Two readings. Who would like to read? Go ahead and type exclamation mark in the chat.
The starting point will be a little bit tricky, so that probably in most of the translation will be on the third paragraph in the middle, in the place after talking about the dots. Okay, so
James, do you have it? And then I will ask Amon, because he has the only person with a different translation. So James, why don't you start and let's confirm with Jason that is the right place.
Okay, I'm going to start with humble words and increase.
Yeah, that's the right place, the humble word. And you probably, let's finish to the all. I think they have 31 advices, right? So let's finish. We up to 11. So let's finish it, and then we can move forward. Probably that would be easy way to do it.
You want to finish the whole chapter?
No, not the whole chapter. The whole
32.
The chapter, third paragraph. Did you get it? So from the humble word to the let me see, to the talking about if enemy march up angry, blah blah blah. Then in the Giles translation, that will be finished on paragraph 3.
Okay, I don't have it yet, but you can stop me maybe.
Yeah, I will stop you.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Humble words and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. Violent language and driving forward as if to the attack are signs that he will retreat. When the light chariots come out first and take up a position on the wings, it is a sign that the enemy is forming for battle. Peace proposals, and unaccompanied by a sworn covenant, indicate a plot. When there is much running about and the soldiers fall into rank, it means that the critical moment has come. When some are seen advancing and some retreating, it is a lure. When the soldiers stand leaning on their spears, they are faint from want of food. If those who are sent to draw water begin by drinking themselves, the army is suffering from thirst. If the enemy sees an advantage to be gained and makes no effort to secure it, the soldiers are exhausted. If birds gather on any spot, it is unoccupied. Clamor by night betokens nervousness. If there is disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the banners and flags are shifted about, sedition is afoot. If the officers are angry, it means that the men are weary. When an army feeds its horses with grain and kills its cattle for food, and when the men do not hang their cooking pots over the campfires, showing that they will not return to their tents, you may know that they are determined to fight to the death. The sight of men whispering together in small knots or speaking in subdued tones points to disaffection amongst the rank and file. Too frequent rewards signify that the enemy is at the end of his resources. Too many punishments betray a condition of dire distress. To begin by bluster, but afterwards to take fright at the enemy's numbers, shows a supreme lack of intelligence. When envoys are sent with compliments in their mouths, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. If the enemy's troops march up angrily and remain facing ours for a long time without either joining battle or taking themselves off again, the situation is one that demands great vigilance and circumspection.
Yeah, here, thank you.
Thank
Certainly.
you. Amon?
Fortunately, I did my homework this time. When the enemy's envoys speak in humble terms, but he continues his preparations, he will advance. When their language is deceptive, but the enemy pretentiously advances, he will retreat. When the envoys speak in apologetic terms, he wishes a respite. When, without a previous understanding, the enemy asks for a truce, he is plotting. When light chariots first go out and take position on the flanks, the enemy is forming for battle. When his troops march speedily and he parades his battle chariots, he is expecting to rendezvous with reinforcements. When half his force advances and the other half withdraws, he is attempting to decoy you. When his troops lean on their spears, they are famished. When drawers of water drink before carrying it to camp, his troops are suffering from thirst. When the enemy sees an advantage but does not advance to seize it, he is fatigued. When birds gather above his campsite, they are empty. When at night the enemy's camp is clamorous, he is fearful. When his troops are disorderly, the general has no prestige. When his flags and banners move about constantly, he is in disarray. If the officers are short-tempered, they are exhausted. When the enemy feeds grain to the horses and his men meat, and when troops neither hang up their cooking pots nor return to their shelters, the enemy is desperate. When the troops continually gather in small groups and whisper together, the general has lost the confidence of the army. Too frequent rewards indicate the general is at the end of his resources. Too frequent of punishments that he is in acute distress. If the officers at first treat the men violently and later are fearful of them, the limit of indiscipline has been reached. When the enemy troops are in high spirits and although facing you, do not join battle for a long time nor leave, you must thoroughly investigate the situation.
Jason?
Okay, so I just give some quick review on the chapter 9. Okay, so last time we talked about the this chapter. The title is the army on the march. Okay, and on the first paragraph we talking about the 4 useful ways, so-called, right? And from the mountain water, salt marshes, and the plain. For when the military march, you may face these 4 different situations. And kind of tied to the south, which has a lot of mountain water, which on the east, salt marshes, which on the west, and the plain probably on the north. Okay, so and then Sun Tzu talk about that's how the ancient sage king Huang Di, the yellow emperor, conquer 4 emperors. Then Sun Tzu talk about different nature landscape. Okay, so here I list as a basin number 4 about the gorgeous basin, inaccessible land, dense bushes, muddy lowland, and narrow passage. So from now on, a lot of things is about land. Okay, so then Sun Tzu come with 31 tips, military tips. Basics I all translate because they all in the same format, something and something. So I translate as when something happened, then you will know something there. So basics, that's the way Sun Tzu to get the information. So last week we talked, I don't think any other translation will put us like 31 point. Okay. If you have somebody do that, please let me know. I really want to know because I think that should be in this way because from the language point of view, because all in the same structure. So I believe they have a 31 point he want to talk about. So last week we talked about the first 11 basically talking about the sign you see from afar, and then you should know what's going on in the enemy's camp, right? For example, you see the birds fly up, and then you know there's somebody hiding there. If you see the dust going up, and depending on what kind of dust, you can judge what kind of activity they have. So today we start from number 12, and I kind of like organize them from 12 to 20. Basics, they try to get enemy's action, try to see what kind of action they have. So let's do from number 12. Sun Tzu talk about when the words from the envoy are humble with preparation, the enemies are about to advance. Okay. When the words are strong and aggressive, they are ready to retreat. Okay, because when the army when you face 2 armies face each other, usually they will send envoy to each side. Okay, to communicate. Okay, so Sun Tzu just tell us the meaning just different, right? When envoys are humble, that means they are going to attack, they are going to advance. When the envoys tone are aggressive, they probably want to retreat. Okay, number 14, when the light chariot come out first from the side, they are forming troops for battle. When you see when the enemies haven't been restricted but propose a peace treaty, they are plotting against us. I think if you look at some of translation, we're talking about without contract or something. I think that my translation will be a little bit different. We can talk about this one later because I believe the original meaning means enemy haven't restricted but propose a peace treaty. He proposed a peace treaty without good reason. That means they are plotting something. Okay. And the number 16, when soldiers were running and the troops are dispatched, we are expecting a battle. Number 17, when some are advancing, some are retreating, it's a duel. Number 18, when soldiers are seen standing and leaning, they are starving. Okay, so I think that's obvious. When those responsible to draw water are seen first to drink it, the enemy are thirsty. Number 20, when enemies don't advance for their advantage, they must be exhausted. Okay. Then from 21 to 26, basics, kind of the psychology game. They Sun Tzu try to tell us how to look at the side to understand what's going on, what's the morale in the enemy's side. So 21 said, when birds are seen gathering, the place is vacant, which is virtual. When shouts are heard during the night, they are nervous. Okay, I believe probably nightmare or something. Number 3, when disturbance in the camp is noticed, their commander's power is weakened. Number 24, when their banner and the flags are shifted, turmoil in the enemy may happen. Okay, so the commander may change the location, or they have something going on. So the commander has to move to a different location in the camp. And 25, when their officers are seen angry, they are weary. Number 26, when their horses are fed with grain, soldiers eat meat of cattle, and they don't hand their hook well, which shows they will not return to the base. The enemy are determined to fight to the death. So they don't prepare to cook anymore. And then the grain is for people, but they feed to horse. And the cattle usually for the transportation, but they eat the meat. So that means they are not going back. They are not returning. So they do the final fight on that. So that's the advice. From 27 to 31, basically Sun Tzu is tell us how to decide what's the situation of the enemy's leader, the commander. So 27, when their commander is known for speaking gently with a small group in subdued tone, he becomes unpopular. 28, when the commander is known for rewarding people frequently, he is deceptive. When the commander is known for punishing people frequently, he is in a predicament. Number 30, when the commander is known for being violent first and then fearful to his people, he is the most incapable commander, that he said. Number 31, when the envoys are sent with complimentary words, they wish for a truce. So finally, Sun Tzu said, if enemies march up angry to face us for a long time without either fighting or retreating, this is the situation demand careful circumspection. Okay, so basics, that's his advice. A little bit long, and then amount. Please.
Thank you, Jason. I really enjoy your translation because it is a fresh take on many of these. And I agree with a lot of your interpretation of the classic Chinese. I'm sort of letting it wash over me and thinking in terms of theme. And it's obvious that the theme is recognition of subtle signs and subtle indicators of different things. And that is very commutable. You can take the idea that you should be watching for little tells to just about any field of any kind, but warfare is a game of strategy, deceit, and to some degree, seizing opportunity. And so there's a little bit more work here than just knowing the tells, as it were. There's something about knowing the situation, knowing what possibilities exist within the uncertainty of the battlefield. And just a few I wrote down are, there's the possibility of the breakdown of loyalty, the breakdown of discipline, the breakdown of resources, the breakdown of a will to stick to a given course of action. And I think almost all 31 of those address one facet or multiple facets of those different possibilities. And if there's a subtext here that Sun Tzu is saying, he is saying that In watching for these, they will present you with opportunities. If you know what you are looking for in advance of the possibilities of things to look for, then you can know what advantage might be seized. If their resources are scarce, you can lure their soldiers with resource. If their discipline is scarce, you can disrupt any sort of orderly conduct. If their will to stick to a plan is scarce, then you can make it even more difficult for that plan to seem viable and have the person constantly be trying to adjust on the fly. These are all kind of, I guess, subheadings to these different things. As I was thinking, there could be more. I'm just spitballing as I'm listening. But I do think one of the challenges we have is often saying, so how is this applicable to modern day warfare? Because obviously we're not looking at whether the birds are nesting over the camp every time or not. And it's not necessary that it's everyday warfare, but you are looking for the indicators that something is off from the expected norm and what that could portend and how to take advantage of it. And that would be true in any number of fields.
Thank you, Amon. Folks, would love to hear your comments on this. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. We're going to start with David. David, go ahead.
Caught by surprise. I thought James was first. It's okay. I just want to say I think Amon really hit the high points really well. It's also saying that you know the dimensions of leadership. You know the things that have to be in place. So when you detect anything, put it in terms of what that would mean in your camp. Why would you not have the pots packed away? Why would you, how could the birds be there? Oh, these things, he's telling you these things. You know what it would mean in your camp, because whenever you come in your camp, the flocks are gone. They're chased away. It's not that officers don't whisper with their men. It's that if this is something you're seeing out of the norm, what does that imply? You have to maintain, you have to maintain discipline. That is how you have an army. That's how you have them act together. This is necessary to conduct war. If there's a sign that the respect has been lost for the other commander, he doesn't say what to do about that exactly. Maybe it means you're ready to attack because they're going to be in disarray. I'm interested in what he would tell you to do, but at least you have that intelligence, because all of these things, supplies have to be maintained and people cannot be tired, and you can see the signs of it. I think it's a really interesting enumeration of some of the obvious things that you can let pass by, and then you lose your advantages. That's all.
Thank you, David. Next up is going to be Mike. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to steal thunder. I think it was James who talked at least twice about poker. And as I was going through that list, I played enough poker to, I'm actually making a checklist of, yeah, I've seen that on the poker table, including on how people stack their chips. They almost stack them in front of them as protection. And when they protect their hand, if you watch carefully how they cover their cards and how aggressive bets are sometimes deemed to be, I'm showing all the strength, but it's the opposite. And even a step further, when they're talking about people that are destitute or have a predicament, if you watch at the poker table very carefully, you should pay attention to how people even tip dealers, or if somebody serves them a drink, because that personal interaction is very different sometimes than the quote unquote war that's taking place in the felt. And if you're astute and you pay attention to that, you get a glimpse sometimes into what's inside the person, not necessarily what their cards and chips are displaying. So I thought that was like a crash course in poker tells reading through that list. So thank you, James. I think it was you who was talking about poker more than once.
Thank you. And Jason or Amon, if you want to comment, just go ahead and type exclamation mark anytime, and I'll put you guys in. Next up is
I
going to
want
be
to
James.
know whether or not the Jen make more money from after attending the session.
Okay, you know what? When we look at chapter 1 through 9, everybody can talk about how much more money they're making on poker or what other impact this going through Art of War has done for you. Would love to hear from everybody then. But now it's going to be James, Quan, followed by Connie. James.
Thank you, Shrikant. Hello, everybody. I was just kind of, there was one that really stood out to me. It was number 15, because it's the idea, it has the idea that the enemy is proposing a peace treaty. Now, who wouldn't want peace, right? So, but the idea here is that there's no action on the field. In other words, that the enemy has not been restricted. In other words, they're not under any pressure. And and they propose a peace treaty. So it's a sign that they're plotting against us. So I think that I sort of think that's really clever. It sort of shows a kind of like a dimensionality, further dimensionality than some of the other ones. When they're leaning on their spears, they're tired, they probably faint, because they don't have enough food, things like that. So, but that one where they're sort of proposing a peace treaty, but they're not really under pressure. So maybe that's like there's a plot against us. Yeah.
Thank you, James. Jason, and then Quan. Jason.
Yeah, since James talked about number 15, I'd like to take 1 minute to explain a little bit here, based on the translation. Okay. If you, I think that you probably will see most of the translation will talk about try to propose a peace treaty without contract or agreement. Okay, and I believe that's a misunderstanding, in my opinion. Okay, so because the word 无约 without contract and ask for peace, they must have a plot against us. But logically, it doesn't make sense, right? When you propose a peace contract, a peace proposal, a peace treaty, it's already a contract. So that doesn't make sense. And I don't think, the reason is, I don't think this 约 means contract, because that means contract is in the modern sense. When we Chinese translate the Old Testament and New Testament, they use this word as a testament. So I think that word originally means constraint. Okay, so you propose a peace treaty without constraint, without being any situation, you just ask for peace, and then they must have something going wrong. So I think that's the reason. So you may pay notice this, or you may not notice this, but that's the part I think my translation could be different than most of other translation.
James, you had a follow-up?
Yeah. I think the Giles, in the Giles, he says, unaccompanied by a sworn covenant. So in other words, they show up and say, hey, we want peace, but there's no, I don't know what the ancient Chinese style would have been, but the idea that they're not actually swearing a peace covenant. In other words, your forces are going to stay there. Our forces are going to go over here. We're going to have peace for now on. But there has to be some kind of formal agreement, and maybe that's what the Chinese text means by contract, peace without contract. Yeah.
Okay, that's exactly I'm talking about, because I disagree on this way, because based on my knowledge, there's nothing like well, they have some ceremonial or ritual. They may drink, they may do something, but I don't see. I see European or Western culture are more contractual. So European, okay, or in the Western culture are more on the contract base, and the Asian are more on people-to-people base, trust, people-to-people trust. So I don't read this word, the Chinese word called yue. That's why Jiao translate as swearing, contract, something. I disagree because that's the modern meaning of that word. So I believe that word during that time, if you dissect that word, you will see that's kind of with rope, okay? That's a string. So you tied you up. That means you tied you up. But of course, you can say that's a contract. But I think during that time, that means your behavior being constrained, short of food or short of people got sick, all this reason. Okay, so without this reason, you ask for peace treaty, then may be the problem. So I think that's my explanation. Yeah.
Thank
Makes
you.
sense.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jason. Next up is going to be Quan, followed by Connie. Quan.
Okay, so I have my own comment, but what Jason just said prompted me to make a small comment on his own comment, that the Western culture is more based on contract and the Eastern culture is more based on personal relationship. But I would like to expand that idea. The Eastern culture is based on the acknowledgement of the highest epistemological developed man in a group. Okay, and it can be right for a small group, a big group, a whole nation, a whole civilization. Meaning that when you have many people together in the East, most of the time people will try to identify the man or the man having the most advanced epistemological level, meaning their mind, their heart, their soul being more developed than the average in the group. And that will create spontaneously a natural hierarchy within the group because of that mutual acknowledgement. So it's true, it's based on personal relationship, but it's based on personal relationship as the natural hierarchy being mutually acknowledged within that group, the group being small, big, or whole civilization. That is my small comment on what Jason said on the fact that the East is more based on personal relationship. But I would say I don't want to be too much of a caricature too. In the West, you also have personal relationship. And I suppose that spontaneous acknowledgement of the other epistemological development is happening spontaneously too, because after all, we all human. But it's true that in the West, there is that legal dimension or that contractual dimension which is more put to the forefront. I don't know if it's a phenomenon of the last 2-3 centuries or is something that can go back, let's say, to the Roman Empire 2000 years ago. That I would say that it's another debate. Okay, so now I coming to my main subject. My main subject is that the Sun Tzu is a very structured book. Okay, I would say not that the other books from Chinese classics are not structured, but this Sun Tzu Ping Fa is absolutely structured. Okay, and I would say that chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, the last 7 chapters are chapters that are more devoted to the practical aspect of military operations, but taking into account a lot the psychological dimension. Because if we look at the excellent chart prepared by Jason from 1 to 31, we can see that the last 5 is concerned the attitude that the inner state of the commander. Okay, so starting with number 27, when the commander is known for speaking gently with small groups and etc. Last but not least, if you want, because once again, in a group, inevitably, the commander has more importance than the rest of the troops, obviously. So the last 5 or 6 concern the commander. The other, from 11 to 25, it concerns the man or the reaction of the officers on the ground, and 1 to 11 is more about what is happening in nature around the moving troops. Okay, because let's not forget that the chapter, the title of the chapter is the Army in March. And once again, that chapter 9 is exactly or almost at the center of the last 7 chapters, meaning that the essential operational and psychological principles that need to be known absolutely by the officers are put in those 31 items. I would, well, once again, I call that the chronos aspect, okay, the operational aspect. And chapter 1 to 3 is more about philosophical principles, and chapter 4, 5, 6 is more about the epistemological dimension. We talk about the fact that it can be compared to a poker game. Wow, I would like to expand it a little bit. The art of war can be translated as the art of living, which is, and playing poker is, I would say, a small part of the art of living. I stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Kwan. Next up is Amon. Amon had something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add this conversation about yet or the idea of contract. We encountered it once before in the Dao De Jing. There it talked about as in to bind with a rope or being bound by rope. And with that imagery, you can see where the idea of contract, as it's colloquially used now in Chinese, it would be easy for Giles and other translators to adopt that. I put into the chat the word qi, which is actually a word for a deed or contract. And there we also saw that in the Tao Te Ching when it talked about the sage prefers to take the left-hand side of the contract and save the right for the other. And that is an important image that I wanted to bring up here, because although sort of the mercantile contractual nature that we've been talking about east to west probably has predominance in the West over Eastern culture, there still was an understanding and a norm of contracts that existed there. And if Sun Tzu had meant for this to be some sort of they are under binding contract, it seems like he would have selected this word, which is why I agree with what Jason was saying. What he's talking about is you have a football team with the run of the field. There's no defense, but they walk up to you and say, hey, let's talk about a truce. They're planning something. You're about to get run over terribly. It makes a lot more sense to me reading it that way as well.
Just a interesting word thing, like the word liable for in Latin comes from ligere, which means binding with cord. So it's very interesting how the words go across as well. Next up is going to be Connie, followed by David. Connie.
Yes, I like that we incorporated last week with my question on the art of war, how it is applicable in today's time. It's also applicable in my life in changing and studying this and seeing it. And I'm watching a fabulous documentary, Chimp Empire, that was showing, I hope someone's watched it if you haven't, on Netflix, and it's showing over chimpanzees who were on the art of war. They were fighting each other for territory. And I was doing, I think David, when in looking at the cards, what strategy, these chimps, the strategy they were using was absolutely filled at least half of those 23 points that you just said. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Next up is going to be David. David.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a part of this book which is not so much about the reasoning level of preventing a fight or positioning yourself, but the reactive, brutish level of what's in front of you that you're confronting, and when it's in disarray, and what are the signs, and someone coming out as an envoy. Yeah, you're right. The binding idea in the West, the idea of the contract, is a to and fro. It's somehow among equals in some way. So there has to be a give and there has to be a take. And if there's not that sort of balance in it, and I think that may be part of what is being said here, it's not being offered like some sort of balance. It's like, no, we have something to offer you here. You want to take this? What do I get? Where's the back and forth? So it's not a real contract. It's a ploy. It's keeping you off balance, because the balance of forces is what makes a contract possible. And if you don't have this, this is what I don't understand in Chinese culture. What would be even a document's authority between two warring parties? Where's the higher authority to say it will be enforced? It's just the force of them against each other, or the trust of them for each other, if they hold that to a higher epistemological level. And I'm not sure what this epistemological level is, because there is history in China of all the same brutalities as in the West. The woman who killed her relatives, the former leader, and then she killed her own children, so they would become the leaders. I mean, what is this epistemological respect between these levels? The force of command, we've already been warned that the commander shouldn't have all the forces. I think was in this text, that the emperor is going to not stand if the military has all the force. There's not that kind of authority in the mere structure of some kind of respect for the emperor. The emperor can be told, you can't go through these gates. You're not behaving like the emperor. It's the force against force is what we're looking at in these 31 points. And I don't know how that mixes with this epistemological level. It's interesting to hear that played out. So thanks.
Juan?
Okay, sorry for the delay. Thank you, David, for opening that question, because that's my favorite subject. And I think that you rightly said that in a contract, often there is an imbalance of power, okay? Because who will guarantee that the contract will be respected, okay? It's a ploy most of the time. And it goes back to what I mean by epistemology. Because the epistemology precisely is to be at the highest principles possible. And those higher principles have been discussed in chapter 1, 2, 3, and chapters 4, 5, 6 were exploring precisely how our imagination can create those structures to make manifest the higher principles in physical reality. And precisely, the making or the creation of high epistemological advanced man, what Plato called the democratic and the aristocratic man, or what Confucius called that at 50 I'm capable to hear the will of heaven, and at 60 I'm capable to hear the will of heaven without complaining. It's their duty to create the structures that will constrain the lower people to obey. Okay, that's an understanding of reality with a verticality in terms of epistemological development precisely. And you are right by mentioning the violence happening in ancient China, because the epistemological adventure is something in progress. It's not something that is frozen at a certain time. Okay, when Confucius proposed the education for reserve, which was a privilege for the young aristocrats to everyone, let's not forget that it took another 1,000 years, around 6th century AD, before the Sui dynasty established the first official public examination system to let everyone participate in that progress in social station, correlated with their epistemological development. Between the time of Confucius, meaning the 6th century BCE, and the time of the Sui dynasty, 1,000 years later or more or less, people who were not born in the nobility were recommended by the nobleman. Okay, so it was not so systematic. So sometimes a noble idea needs time to be implemented, and even the time between the Sui dynasty and now, that idea advanced step by step. But the people who are only living in the higher dimensions but not capable to put stuff in reality, well, there's a name for them. We discussed it last time when we were staying later on. They are called eggheads. Okay, and eggheads are not gentlemen. The Confucian ambition is to create a gentleman. Okay, so people having high principles, but being streetwise enough to translate those high principles into reality. And once again, it's an adventure that is not yet finished.
Thank you, Quan.
Can I ask one? Was that
Please go ahead.
Manchurians who were the first broad education? Is that under a Manchurian leader?
No, it was the education that has been offered to everyone started with Confucius, okay, in the 6th century BCE. So it was a chain for Chinese civilization. But the true first examination system allowing everyone to participate to the social advancement, it was in the 6th century AD, 1,000 years after Confucius. But meanwhile, people from humble background was capable to advance in life because of personal recommendation coming from noblemen, from the Chinese people of different dynasty between Confucius and 1,000 years later, the Sui dynasty.
And that's who I was asking about. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, David. Great question, and thanks, Quan.
Yeah,
next up, go ahead, Jason.
Oh yeah, that's the side web. Just like we should put this question on hold. And this Saturday, Quan is going to have a section talking about measures. So if you are interested on the Confucius and education and the moral sense, this Saturday 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock on the East Coast, Quan will have a lot to talk about this. So that'll be a good chance to discuss. Thank you.
Exactly. If you allow me, Jason,
Please.
just 30 seconds. Those who want to know the difference between an egghead and a gentleman should attend on this Saturday.
All right, egghead versus the gentleman on Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern time, 2 p.m. Pacific time. Next up is going to be Allison.
As I was reading through this, I was thinking about all the different ways that you look to see if the enemy is approaching, and how many, and the smoke means this, the smoke means that. And it occurred to me that this is exactly the thought process that women go through when they're walking anywhere at night. You have to stay on the side of the street where it's light. You never walk down the small streets. You always stay on the bigger streets. You try to plot a route home going through the busy streets you can, and avoid all of the quieter streets. If you park your car in a garage, you basically don't park your car in a garage unless there's a valet, because it's not safe to go up to like the 9th floor by yourself. Everywhere you go, you got your keys in your hand. If you park your car on the street between the street and your house, the keys are in your hand before you unlock your door, and then you walk in your house. It seems just sad that we live like this. It's like, being in a war, but it's what we do. We all do it. We don't talk about it usually, but we all do it. We're trained by our mothers to do that. The other thing that I thought about with this is that, so many of these things in this book could be applied to so many wars in literally all over the world. But it seems to me that the hardest thing is not creating war and fighting a war. The hardest thing is creating peace, and a real lasting peace. That's the thing that I think is the most difficult to sustain. You know, you see so many places where they just fight for thousands of years. And then you see some places where they create a peace between two countries that are at war, and then the two countries become friends. And that's a truly remarkable thing when they're able to do that. And I don't know, that would be interesting to study. How are they able to do that? You know, what are the things that they're able to do? Because as much as I really enjoy this book, you literally could apply it to any country anywhere, but not every country is able to create peace with their enemies. And so I think that's just an interesting way to go.
Both great points. Thank you. Thank you, Alison. Next up is going to be Kwan, and then we will go ahead and go to the rest of the chapter. Kwan, go ahead.
A very short reply to Alison and to everyone. This book, The Art of War, can be named The Art of Peace, because let's not forget that in the first 3 chapters concerning the general principles, the idea was to prevent war. And if you have to go to war, you will have to be sure of why you want to go to war and not what or how. Okay, the central question is why. So it's also the art of peace.
Thank you, Kwan. Next up, we're going to go to the next section.
Let me interrupt what Juan is talking about. Yeah, I think it's very right at the beginning. It's right now it's very past time. And I just give you some spoil, okay, because for the later part, Sun Tzu is going to go back again, okay? He's going to tell about moral lesson. If you don't fight, it's the most immoral thing, because you already, I'm from Taiwan, in the Taiwanese word is, you already wash your head already wet. You have to wash your head. You cannot say, oh, my hair is wet. So that's the metaphor.
Thank you. David, a quick point from you, and then we'll continue.
And I was just volunteering to read.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, David. You need to unmute, though.
Excellent point. Be better. If our troops are no more in number than the enemy, that is amply sufficient. It only means that no direct attack can be made. What we can do is simply to concentrate all our available strength, keep a close watch on the enemy, and obtain reinforcements. He who exercises no forethought, but makes light of his opponents, is sure to be captured by them.
Jason, up to where should we read?
Please continue to finish it.
Oh, all right. This is marked as number 5.
Yeah, that's fine.
If soldiers are punished before they've grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive. And unless submissive, then they'll be practically useless. If, when the soldiers have become attached to you, punishments are not enforced, they will still be useless. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in the first instance with humanity, but kept under control by means of iron discipline. This is a certain road to victory. If in training soldiers, commands are habitually enforced, the army will be well disciplined. If not, its discipline will be bad. If a general shows confidence in his men, but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the gain will be mutual. That's it. Show confidence. Okay.
Amon.
And I forgot to mention before, this is the Samuel Griffith translation. In war, numbers alone confer no advantage. Do not advance relying on sheer military power. It is sufficient to estimate the enemy situation correctly and to concentrate your strength to capture him. There is no more to it than this. He who lacks foresight and underestimates his enemy will surely be captured by him. If troops are punished before their loyalty is secured, they will be disobedient. If not obedient, it is difficult to employ them. If troops are loyal, but punishments are not enforced, you cannot employ them. Thus, command them with civility and imbue them uniformly with martial ardor, and it may be said that victory is certain. If orders which are consistently effective are used in instructing the troops, they will be obedient. If orders which are not consistently effective are used in instructing the troops, they will be disobedient. When orders are consistently trustworthy and observed, the relationship of a commander and his troops is satisfactory.
Jason?
Okay, so after if you remember on the last few items talking about the general on the enemy side, right? So they're looking for the sign, what's going on the general. So I think the last part is talking about me as a general. What can I do? Because we know, I think everybody, it's the immunity, okay? Immunity is the big concern for ancient, for today, for Western, for East, even in the Amazon tribe, okay? I think if you have a war, you have a power, then the art of leadership, how to control all these powerful, well-equipped people is very important issue. So I think Sun Tzu, in I think that's four tips on the talking about how to get the information about the opponent side leadership. Right now, he's going to talk about the leadership of my side, of our side, right? So how to train, discipline your soldiers. I think that's the key here. So in just 1 minute, let me read. Okay. In the military, a greater number do not have a greater value. Let me see. It only matters in unforced aggression, yet with sufficient concentrated strength, foreseeing the enemy's movement and getting right people. That's all. So I think his tone is talking about advice against, he wants unforced aggression. That means you should not have a premature aggression. And the important thing, you should concentrate your force, foresee animals' movement, which already give you the tips, and getting the right people. So right now he's going to talk about how to have your people right, behavior right. So the important keyword, Chinese call fu, and I will translate it as subordinate, because you need to follow the leader. Only those who have no forethought and go easy on the enemy will be captured by them. If you punish the soldiers who are not yet personally attached to you, they won't be subordinate. Insubordinate soldiers are useless. If you avoid punishing the soldiers who are already personally attached to you, they will become useless. Okay, so that's the way to control your soldier. And then I break down to the 4 points for the last section. Okay, I will explain later. Basics here in Chinese use 2 words, one called 文, one called 武. Okay, 文 means, I think I see a few different translations. It's difficult to explain, but one is the when you, I think commonly we will say it's a good cup, bad cup, right? So the way to control a good cup, bad cup. But here is more on the control your soldier with later. That's the word I like to use later. Okay. Or use force to control your soldier. So his idea, Sun Tzu's ideas is 2 things. One, you have to use force. Second, you have to make it as a habitual. That means regularly do it. You cannot sometimes do it, sometimes don't do it. But unfortunately, during that time, they don't have a real logical way to write it. So it sounds a little bit odd. But I try to, instead of reorganize in a logical way, and I decide to keep the original sentence. So Sun Tzu said, directing soldiers with letters and unify them with force is a certain way of gaining victory. So first, letters, okay, so it means on the paper, on the code, on the regulation, okay, and the teaching, that's the way to do it. And if they violate it, then you need to use force. If directives are followed regularly to edify people, people will be subordinate. If directives are not followed regularly, people will not be subordinate. When directives are followed regularly, the commander and the people and soldier are mutually beneficial. So basically, talking about you need to have everybody follow the rule regularly. So basically, only this way, both commander and the soldier will be benefit. Yeah, thank you. Aman, please.
Thank you. I'm going to take advantage that we're going to be opening this up a little, but first I'll start just with this chapter and that opening gambit. Greater numbers don't mean greater value. This is an argument against what later some have referred to as Viking tactics. And Viking tactics is somewhat of a pejorative, but basically it's I can field more people than you can kill. That is the tactic that was a working formula for many Viking tribes for much of European history. They did become actually more sophisticated and refined than that simply. But this idea that I'll have greater numbers of soldiers on the field, and yeah, you can mow down the first few lines, but they're just going to keep coming, actually was also somewhat the strategy of Rome that allowed it to just persist and persist and persist. Keep killing us, we'll keep coming back. Sun Tzu was saying that's really a horrible strategy. It's a terrible tactic. It's an inefficient way of conducting warfare. You may or may not have greater numbers. It's nowhere near as important as proper assessment and proper foreknowledge and proper structure and order within your own ranks. And then he goes on to talk about maintaining and obtaining that order within those ranks. Here I get a chance to branch out a little bit. We've talked about the parallels to warfare, to sports, to poker, to business. But I want to talk about education, because here is a great example of where Sun Tzu could speak directly into the classrooms of hundreds of thousands of educators. We have something semi-unusual in the Western world, which is an overdeveloped sense of equanimity must be maintained. You'll find instructors and teachers who are so wedded to this idea that they can't accept their own role as being in charge of a classroom, as being in a superior position. And that sort of cognitive dissonance comes to a head when then they deal with students who disrupt the classroom in one way or another. Sun Tzu would look at that teacher and say, you're doing this wrong because you are not recognizing you're the person in charge of that classroom, and you have to set an expectation and maintain it consistently. It needs to be, and this at least, I think most educators realize the need for even treatment amongst their students, even if as they sort of jockey with this own sort of discomfort with being the superior in the classroom, they recognize the need for being objectively even in evaluating, dealing, and interacting with students. And that works in sort of a double-edged coin, or a double-edged blade, as it were. Sun Tzu talks about the persona that a general, a commander, must adopt. You have to be in charge, and there's a persona that comes with that, and that is different than being your buddy self, or your self who sees a soldier and just doesn't like the cut of his jib, so you stop paying attention and ignore them. You can't do that. You can't be friends with some. You can't dislike others. Just like a teacher can't like some students more than others. We do, but we have to be even-handed in our treatment. And being too friendly actually is a disservice to them. A lot of, especially, maybe not as much in grade school, but as you get higher in education, there's a lot of sort of we're peers, we're, colleagues sort of relationship happening there. And really, it's more of a mentor-mentee relationship, and it needs to be maintained that way. I can't look at a friend and tell him, well, you're getting a B plus as my friend. That friend won't remain my friend very long. I can't look at a student and treat them like a friend and then give them a C. They'll look betrayed. So there's this important sort of professional distance and persona and consistency that he is talking about that directly, to me, translates into the classroom. Back to those signals and indicators, those subtle signs of 9.3, this also comes into play where maybe we don't see the bird circling over an empty camp, but maybe we see the kid coming in with the same clothes they wore yesterday, or we see them coming in trying to sneak in a granola bar. We look for the very smallest of signs to get an indication of what it could potentially mean, so we can stem off a greater problem before it becomes a greater problem. And taking advantage of those signs and signals is something that, again, I think we feel a little uncomfortable with because we don't want to admit that a manipulation game is actually happening and in education. Everybody remembers the teacher's pet, and everybody knows that that's the student sucking up to the teacher because they want a better grade. They're being manipulative, but it's all above board because everybody knows it. In the same way, you as an instructor are required to be manipulative of your students to get them to do the reading, to get them to engage in material. And it feels almost Machiavellian to say that. But one of the things, because we're getting to what have I taken from the art of war? I've taken to the classroom to take advantage of these little signs and signals. If a student presents in such a way that I suspect maybe they've got a crush on me, well, that is something I need to be leery of. We're never going to be in an enclosed room, just one-on-one, the two of us. There will always be someone there, or it will always be a public space, full stop. But that's stemming off a problem. Taking advantage is taking advantage of it to use it to your advantage. This student wants me to see them in a positive light, probably a positive light more than I would be comfortable. But I can dangle that out there as a incentive to try and raise up and live up to being worth that positive light with certain encouragements like, I was sorry to see you come in late today. I really liked having you in class. I want to see you get here on time. Or I liked your work, but I know that you're smarter than this and you can get a little bit more out of it. You can use something that could seem manipulative and insidious, but doing it for the reason of actually improving the person's outcomes for themselves is actually what I think good educators take advantage of. So those just a couple of things that I wanted to bring to the table as we open this up. I have more, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Next up is going to be Kwan, Allison, and David. Kwan.
Okay, I think that Aman started in an excellent manner the discussion, because precisely that is the question of epistemological development and justice, precisely. Because if you are in a certain role in life, it's pertaining to justice that you play that role as perfectly as possible, and that you can resort to some skillful manipulations guided by good intentions. Okay, if you think to take again the examples given by Aman, if you think that a student has a crush on you, well, you can either use her bodily or you can use that crush to make her advance epistemologically. In that sense, you would be a noble person because you are more advanced epistemologically and you resort to a skillful manipulation in her favor. So that is inevitable. And we go back a little bit to the notion of contract, okay? Because the relations between a teacher and students is a kind of contract. Who will enforce that contract? That the person who will enforce the contract is the person in the superior social role and being at the same time epistemologically more advanced. So I go back to what David said half an hour ago, a contract is a ploy, okay? It's a skillful means, it's a skillful manipulation guided by good intention, because a contract means that the both sides have to be perfectly equals or practically equal. That situation is very rare in life, especially between nations or group of civilizations. It means that it will be the stronger side who will decide the enforcement or the non-enforcement of the contract. Just look at the United Nations organization. Okay, it's a group controlled by the 5 permanent members, and that's an oligarchy. But if that oligarchy is well-intentioned and epistemologically well-developed, they can play their role in a good manner for the planet. So for me, the question is that oligarchy of the 5 permanent members capable of playing their role, having good intention, and being skillful enough to propose interesting ploys, maintaining peace on Earth. I stop for now.
Thank you, Quan. Next up is going to be Allison, followed by David. Allison.
Yeah, I really like what Amon was saying. It's really true, the thing that when you're in a classroom, you can't act like you're the friend to the kids at all. And I know as a new teacher, I had a lot of difficulty with that at first. And then I went to the circus and I watched the lion tamer in the cage with the lion. And it was like the light bulb went on. I went, that's what I have to do, because clearly the lion is, more dangerous to the lion tamer. But the whole reason that the lion doesn't attack him is not anything really that the lion tamer is doing. He's not really hurting him. It's the way that he walks around the cage like he owns the place. He takes on that role of authority. And when you're a teacher, and also if you're leading, like any kind of discussion with other people where you're trying to negotiate, you want to take on the role of the powerful one at all times. And then also just the whole, like in the classroom, everything about a classroom is manipulation. It's completely Machiavelli, completely. But that's what you have to do in order to get the results that you want. And it's not so much that you're, and actually the teachers, it's like subs come in screaming and yelling and they're completely ineffective. The smartest thing is you go in and you're very calm, but you're authoritative and you're controlling the class in all kinds of ways. And sometimes it's, where you're sitting a child, where you're, certain kids I always put in a corner spot because you want to remove the distractions around them. Sometimes, take the talkative boy and surround him with girls who don't speak, or, there's like a million things. You put them near a helper kid who's going to help them, or there's so many different dynamics. You have kids are like alpha males fighting for power, and there's like a million and one things, but they're so similar to this book. It's fascinating. It really is. It's just so completely similar. That's in my thoughts.
Thank you, Allison. Next up is going to be David.
Right. So we're looking at leadership and defining the success of leadership as something that we know relies, or it's claimed here, relies on the discipline in the ranks. It's essential. What is the sign of the leadership? That you can lead directly, uncontestedly. There's something in the right about what you're doing. And how is that maintained and earned? And it's not coercion, but punishment is part of this, because it is somehow the objective recognition that something went wrong, and so it stands there on its own. It's not under you, and this is a Machiavellian thing, maybe it's a deception. It is under you. It is up to you to maintain that structure, but it's not you doing the punishing. It's the rule broke and the rule has to be mended, right? You want this cohesion, and underneath it, the respect of the person keeping that system in place. And the difficulty, as was pointed out, this is difficult in family and applies to school and the work environment. I know I had a boss who liked favoritism. He was in his position via favoritism, manipulation. It's important in politics that we don't feel that people are being favored for reasons that have nothing to do with the performance. They get punished for what they do wrong, or there's something undermined in the power of the politic. And policing, we don't want people stopped, in ways that do not seem just and balanced, like there's a policy in effect, like some kind of personal decision. No, it has to be a policy that applies uniformly, and that's what uniform justice is happening in the group. Social policy, even in private social groupings, you want this kind of feeling. So I think one thing is coming out from number 4 and 5, these paragraphs at the end, is this reverse, the converse. If discipline is failing, like you see it isn't working, it gives us a clue. So here's a challenge. What is going wrong? It's up to the leader to sense it's going wrong. For example, in the family, what's the hidden problem? There must be some I'm missing, that I'm performing favoritism. I'm being inconsistent. There's an unfairness felt among the siblings. What is it that is the failure of leadership? The leader has to know that and then take this up and say, here are the things that would make it work. What am I missing? The clues are at least laid out here that, you have to have discipline. That's not wrong. There has to be punishment. There has to be, respect back and forth, but it has to be even-handed. So you have to have the buy-in in the first place, that it's going to be even-handed and it's for the common good in some way. So like Kwan, said, the leader, from what you were saying, this made me think the leader has to detect this error and flaw and get to their own imperfection and their own correction and enforce it on themselves. The leader has to enforce that they're doing this. I'm not providing enough discipline, whatever it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
So sorry about that, David. So folks, what we're going to do is that we're going to have a quick comment by James, and then Jason is going to give you an overview of chapters 1 through 9. And then we would like to hear what you're getting from Art of War. Okay, so James, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I like what Amon and Allison were saying about school teaching and the Art of War. So I think you guys should get together and maybe think about writing a book, The Art of War for school teachers or something along those lines. You never know, it might work, because I think your ideas are fairly complementary. But anyway, yeah, so that way we'd have some fruit out of learning from Sun Tzu in an unexpected way.
Yes,
thank you.
It would be the drama of the lion tamers doing kung fu. That would be the theme that is combining what they have said so far. Let's go to Jason. Jason.
Yeah, thank you everyone. And I know a lot of people have been here from the beginning. So this week could be our 10th week continuously. And I think we did, well, not only among us, I did a great job. I think everybody did a great job and helping us to have this project moving. Really thank you. And but I think the last time remind me by a lady, I forget what her name, and she kind of jumped in the, I told her you're in the wrong place, but not wrong place and joined at the wrong time, because we already passed the moral lesson on the beginning. And so I almost want to suggest we probably not allow people join on the chapter 12, which is talking about setting fire. So if you jump first time join and just cut in on the chapter 12, you will see, wow, what's going on? You guys talking about setting fire. So I think that's a very good, it's just joking. Okay, you can join anytime. Okay, but I just want to remind everyone from the beginning, just give a quick review from chapter 1 to probably to 13. Okay, just get a big picture, what's going on, and then we can continue. And then after that, probably we can share some of your thoughts in general. And I really encourage, I see a lot of faithful participants and usually don't talk a lot. I would suggest you share your idea, or even you just tell me I really don't get it, or it's too difficult or nonsense. That would be fine. That would be one of the opinion, because I don't believe everyone will say that's great. So please. So I just take about 2 minutes to go over what I think important. Just take a 10,000 miles elevation to take a look on this book. Okay, so from the very beginning, Sun Tzu talking about the planning, right? It's everything starts from the plan. Okay, so talking about the heaven, the earth, the Tao, the channel, the method. Okay, that's 5 things you need to pay attention on that. As a prince, a ruler. Okay, I assume the first 4 chapters is talking to the ruler, the boss. Okay, so then chapter 2 talking about the money. Okay, so talking about how terrible, okay, a war. Okay, if you don't know the evil side, the disadvantageous side of the war, okay, then you will have a problem. So he start to count, okay, how much money you will spend during the war, how much cost you have to deal. So every day, that's just like, spending, cash flow. You will have a cash flow problem, okay? So that's the Sun Tzu's tone on the 2nd chapter, okay? Tell you the evil side, the bad side of the war. Make sure you are really ready for this war. Number 3, start to talking about the strategy, right? So basically, he lists 4 ways to fight, 4 kind of strategy, okay? Number 1 is by strategy. That means you resolve the problem without going to the war, without the conflict, just like someone talked about to make peace with your enemy. I think that's the number 1 choice. Don't forget, Sun Tzu tell the prince, that's the first choice you have to go. If you fail, what you need to do? Go to diplomacy, okay? Go to United Nations, try to the international court, try to resolve this problem with your enemy, to use money, whatever, to resolve it. So these 2 cannot resolve. What's the number 3? Will be the military, right? So right now we're talking about fighting, marching. That's already choice number 3, right? So you have to send the military because you failed by making friends with your enemy. You failed by the diplomatic solution. So you have to go to the war, the military. So he kept telling the worst case is besieging a city. So you fighting, set fire, go to the battlefield. That's the last choice. So right now we are in the choice number 3. But don't forget, we have a choice number 1, number 2, which both are already failed. So we are going to number 3. But since you go to number 3, you cannot say, no, let's go back to make friends with our enemy. Probably too late. I think that's probably Sun Tzu's the message, right? So, and then number 4, start to talk about, chapter 4, talk about the formation and the basics. Sun Tzu's concept is very clear, right? You have to make sure yourself, doesn't matter you go to war or not going to war, you have to make sure yourself is in the undefeatable situation, okay? So doesn't matter what kind of solution you decide to go, you have to be in this solution. So he said the words, I really like it. He said, the winning strategy is you should foresee the victory. Then you start to fight. You don't fight and looking for winning. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, you already know you are going to win. Then the fighting a war is just execute your plan. Okay, not like you are fighting that hope I can win. That's wrong. Okay, so we finished on the first part talking to the prince. Then right now I will assume, of course, the line is blurred. Okay, so it's arguable. So Sun Tzu turned to the general. Okay, because on the first part also talk about the quality of the general. So important message will be the concept of 士, right? I think I spent 2 weeks, we talk about the concept of 士. And then basics, the concept is, you can call it the configuration, situation, potentiality, everything. But basics, the picture, if you want to imagine, if you put a rock on the mountain top, and you are going to rolling down by itself. If you the rock is round, it will roll it down. So it creates a lot of power. That's the 士. So Sun Tzu is talking about when you are, as a general, you have to make sure you are on the right side, right 士. So you can win. Don't blame on people. You created the 士 first. Then you pick the people to fit this one, then you can win. You don't just ask people to do it. You have to make sure the 士 is right. So he used the example like the water flowing. If the water rush fast, you can flow the rock, right? So I think that's the concept he's doing. Chapter 6, Sun Tzu start talking about during the fighting, I call it the virtual and the real, right? What is virtual, what is real? And more, another metaphor would be egg and the pebble, right? They both looks the same, but which one is egg? You poke, you broke, and the pebble is solid. So you should cheat, or it's a pretense, right? Confuse the enemy with egg and the pebble. And on the other way, you have to look at your enemy to know which side is pebble, which side is egg, right? Chapter 7 start to talking about the military striving, right? So I just remind everyone talking about when the military setting, and one thing I think important is talking about, I think Sun Tzu uses 6 metaphors to describe the military, right? Like the gust, like the gust, you have to move like gust, wind fast. You have to stay stable like a forest. You have to plunder like a fire. You have to, how do we call it? Unpredictable like a black cloud, and you shall attack like a thunderbolt. So that's the way Sun Tzu described the situation. Then we move to chapter 8, and then the title is 9 adaptations. So basics tell you during the battle area, the battlefield, the situation is changed. You have to change the situation. You have to change your situation. And one important message is talking about the general get the command order from the prince, go to the war. Give you some tip to do this. One important message is you don't take, after you go to the war, you don't take all the command from your prince, because you are responsible. So from this point on, Sun Tzu keep putting more and more burden on the general, because you already have the troops. You going outside, even the prince, the ruler's order, you don't have to listen all the suggestion or command, because you are responsible. You have full responsibility. So they move to this chapter, right? It's going to more intense and more intense. The army on the march. I think we already talked about. They have the different kind of situation, mountain, water, lake, and the plan, and give you 31 tips and tell you how to control the leadership. And the next week, chapter 10, and the next week, chapter 11, basic talk about the land. Okay, because at that time, China only have the most important is the foot soldier. So the land, so that's the area we're going to talk about. Then chapter 12 is the fire, okay, setting fire. Chapter 13 is talking about using the spy. Okay, so that would be end. But it's Sun Tzu is not just like to the end, then talking about fire and the spy, then finish. During the talking about fire and the spy, Sun Tzu never forget to tell you the meaning of moral. Okay, he still has the moral sense here, but that moral, the military moral, is different than Confucius' moral, is different than our concept of moral. Is during the military, what means moral? Okay, I think that's important for all of them. So I'll stop here and give to Amin.
Jason, that was a tour de force. So Amon, go ahead.
I can't top that, and I'm not even going to try. I do want to, from this same 30,000 foot view, offer something I think I'd said once before, and I don't remember how long ago it was, but there is one surefire method to avoid war that's 100% effective. Give the enemy everything they want. That is an absolute recipe for avoiding conflict. If you just roll over and give them absolutely everything they want, you avoid war. You do not necessarily avoid slaughter, perdition, all the ills of being an occupied people, but you can avoid war. Sun Tzu recognized this, and there were states at the time of the warring states that also felt this to be true. They felt that the soft hand was going to save them, and they were swallowed up quite quickly. Sun Tzu wants to absolutely level the gravity of the choice to engage in war upon the head of state, upon the head of the general, upon the heads of everyone involved in the enterprise. But he was never Pollyannish and never ignorant of the fact that it may become necessary. And if it becomes necessary, among other things, it is better to be able to engage in this enterprise from a proactive stance than from a reactive stance. If you are reacting, you didn't see things coming, you are too late to the game. Something Allison said about women's heightened awareness training that exists to just navigate through day-to-day life kind of is akin to this. The idea that you need to have that extra layer of alertness to the possibility that this is on the horizon, and it is undesirable, but occasionally unavoidable. And if you have to act, you need to act decisively, you need to act swiftly, you need to act with a total commitment to the enterprise, because half-assing it is actually going to cost you much more in the long term than engaging fully. And if you take this just on a one-to-one sort of level, if you are the unfortunate person who finds themselves the victim of an assailant and have to defend yourself, you can't be hesitating in the midst of it to say, oh, maybe I'm overdoing it. Maybe this is too much. Maybe I'm, maybe I didn't have to go for the eyes, or I didn't have to. You cannot have that sort of self-conflict at work in you and have any hope of coming out of it in the least scathed fashion as possible. I think that's the spirit Sun Tzu brings to this, is this gravity of recognition of stakes, this gravity of what the costs are, but also a reality check that this may be unavoidable. And if unavoidable, don't avoid it. Don't bend over backwards to avoid it, because you will not be doing yourselves any favors to avoid war at all cost, because all cost could in fact cost you all.
Thank you, Amon. So folks, we have a request, Jason, Amon, and I, and Joe, who's not here, but I'm sure he would agree wholeheartedly. This request, we've been doing this for some time, And it's a very unusual way of approaching this book, where we are, firstly, Jason and Mon, they are actually doing the translation for us. So we are able to kind of go through character by character. Secondly, we are having this robust dialogue throughout. So what has this done for you? I want to give a chance. First, I'm going to give priority to people who have not spoken much during this entire time, not just this particular meetup, but across meetups. If you have been quiet, but coming regularly, there are many, many, many such people. Would like to hear from you what the experience has been. You can be as brief as you want. I would love to hear from you. And then from everybody, would love to hear, what are you learning from these meetups? So please go ahead and type an exclamation mark. And I'm going to take it in the order of people who have not spoken much. So go ahead. Okay. All right. So go ahead. Don't do it just in chat. You're welcome to do it in chat, but would love to hear from you in voice. Let's start with Carly. Carly, go ahead.
Thank you, Shrikant. I don't know exactly where to start. I have just been absolutely loving these sessions across the different meetup groups, but bragging about it in my real life to people that ask, oh, I've read Art of War. They'll pick it up and say, I read it last week because you mentioned how much you're loving it. And it's hard for me to describe how much I'm getting out of it by going line by line and hearing the different translations and looking up the traditional Chinese. Jason, your take on so many things has given such a dynamic depth to being able to look at things and then have those ideas percolate in the back of my mind and throughout my life apply them in different aspects. And it's just neat to have an overall sense of the Eastern philosophy, ideas of yin yang, the ideas of filial, all kinds of things that sort of permeate and give me personally a little bit of a sense of peace and understanding that isn't imbued necessarily in my Western upbringing. Moreover, I find that these actual readings are incredibly poetic and are dynamic in the sense that they are, well, literal, but the literal translation is different and can be applied differently in how one thinks about it or to what situation it's applied. And that is invaluable. I probably have a whole lot more to say, so I'll let other people spark ideas in me. But thank you so, so, so much.
Wonderful. And Carly, you can come back and continue your comments. You're welcome to do that. But would love to hear from as many of you as possible. So go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. We're going to go with David next. And please take your time to talk about this. This is very important because this is the feedback that we need. Go ahead.
Right, I'm just stepping in to encourage people to quickly type in an exclamation point and tell us stuff, because everyone has to be affected by reading this. This is not a common sort of thing to be doing. So in my tradition, you kind of, the ultimate thing you are waiting for and singing hallelujah, we don't have to study war anymore. That's what you want. You want to be hammering your swords into plowshares, not study war anymore. So, but this, I've never studied war, right? And so this is the dark side. Perhaps it's actually an essential thing to think through, walk through, and put your mind at, to be able to talk about peace. Because to me, it's sort of given me a footing. My contrary way of thinking is peace is always the best, the good, the highest good. It's all. It's the all. And that ignores, it makes it hard to read Machiavelli. Your truth is the all, the good. So that dark side is really an important cognitive balance to allow me, when I assert things, to know the other side. So I see what I'm saying dialectically for the contrary way of thinking, because there is a time when war is necessary, and we have to admit we all understand that. Even though we don't want to ever realize that objectively, in the world, it's always standing in front of us as there's stuff we confront that we can't diplomatically resolve or even talk our way out of. And the price of ignoring it is just too great. So these considerations, even if they're not absolutely comprehensive, are covering so much of the important things. And it's great to do it in such a distinguished thinking community. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Next up is going to be Paul, followed by James. Again, I will reiterate David's invitation. Please go ahead and type an exclamation mark so we can hear from most people. Paul.
Yeah, I've been at a lot of these. I haven't been at everyone, but I have been in a lot. And I'll just briefly, first again, congratulate everyone. And in particular, Jason, like even tonight, the difference between some Chinese word meaning make sure that if they come with peace and they're not bound by a shortage of resources is one way of saying something, but other people are saying that word means contract. That just shows how important it is to have you here. Like, oh my God, how could anyone read this book without a guy like you here? So, and very amazing, and amazing that Srikant has arranged it. And then all these powerful minds talking about it. But secondly, what it brings forward to me is a lot of what was just said in a different way by David, but the sort of liberal mindset that makes you just go peace, peace, peace. But then there's the wiring we learn about in psychology and the wisdom teachings, that there will be people that just want to increase their personal resources. I'm reminded of the Independence Day, the movie, where the aliens come down and some good-minded person goes, well, what do you want? He goes, we want you to die. So that situation happens. And so this is like, you have to acknowledge it. But what I love about the book, to Allison's point of it's amazing there's ever peace, is if people took the first 4 chapters and didn't take it with a grudge that's generational, for instance, because once you've crossed the line where the alien says, we want you to die, you've probably at a point where you can't gain trust. You have to recognize that and go into war mode. But my point is, your son might meet the alien son, and they should start over using the first 4 chapters and say, how can we avoid this? They didn't lose trust with one another. And that's why there's hope. By that emphasis in this book teaches the art of peace. But I never would have gotten any of that by just reading the book. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark to share what you're getting from this experience. Next up is going to be James. James.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I spent my whole day studying German philosophy. That's mostly what I do. But I love Chinese philosophy and Chinese books and Chinese poetry and this art of war. And Jason is just such a level-headed person and always gives a good presentation. And I always I love this book because of the fact that it tells when not to go to war. That is so important today to have. It's completely in line with the world situation. We have to know when to have a war, when not, when war is impossible. And Sun Tzu believes that there are times when war is impossible and teaches how to reckon that contingency. So that I think that's one of the remarkable facts about this book, and that's something I really appreciate about it. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next up is going to be Amon, followed by Kwan. Amon, what are you getting from this?
So I wanted to go even further beyond this. I first came for the Tao Te Ching because I was a student of Taoism and the Tao Te Ching for years and years and years. And then I began doing this with Jason. And this has been a deeper reading, a much deeper reading than I could do possibly on my own, to go chapter by chapter, line by line, word by word, back and forth to actually discuss, the connotations, the iterations, the possible interpretations. I could not have asked for a more of a master's class on the subjects that we have been studying in these courses, and that has been invaluable to me. I also have gotten a adjustment to my pedagogy. I have realized that it's more important to learn less better than it is to pack more into a lesson. And I'm slowly trying to implement that into my own classroom, which is a real challenge, because if they're quiet, I'm going to fill that silence with noise of me blathering and blathering and blathering. So those are just two of the things that I've gotten from this, and a lot of wonderful connections. I love seeing the same faces or boxes with names in them week after week, because I feel like I'm friends with those boxes and those faces. It'd be great to eventually, get my tenure, go on a 6-month sabbatical to write a textbook and come and visit each and every one of you in person. To that end, what I'd like to get out of this still, I'd love it if we ever publish, but beyond that, I don't have any great aspirations. I'm just glad that I've always been, I'd rather see the complete work done. And that is really satisfying to me, whether there's recognition anywhere or Harper's Collins ever calls me or not.
Thank you, Amon. And Jason, I have to point out to you, nowadays, publishing is very easy with self-publishing, because the most important thing is to get it out there so people can start using it. You're doing such amazing work, and would love to see it there.
I learned from the during the .com boom. I don't know anybody here or not. I learned from that, copyright protection, all this one, the trade secret doesn't work. If you have the great thing, you stand up, shout it to the world, let everybody know. I think that's the way to do it. Not like try to protect and hide it and say that's the best, that's my baby. So that's what I learned.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You are publishing in a sense, right, Shrikant, when you put this all up?
Yeah. I have no, I don't know, financial, social, whatever reason. I just want to have people get a comment and tell me, how do you feel? And I remember James also sent me message, tell me, oh, this one, I think this words will be better. And that's wonderful. That's I like. Or somebody tell me, I don't think that doesn't make sense. That's all wonderful, because that would be everybody's right. And I have no, I think we just take 1 minute before I leave. I just want to make sure because I read ancient archaic Chinese, I would say in a pretty good level. Okay, so I think I want to very objectively share this feeling for the people who doesn't know Chinese. So I'm not going to polish the word. I'm not, sometimes it doesn't make sense, sometimes sounds odd. I just will keep this oddness there. And then, so you make your own judgment. So I don't mind you tell me, oh, that's a stupid statement or something. That's fine, because that's ancient people and not me, okay? Sun Tzu said it. So you can say it's bad, it's useless, and it's wrong. That's all fine, because that's my work. Okay, so that's it. So
Yeah.
Can I say one thing? Can I say one thing to Jason about?
Yes.
I think in your translation, in the very last ones, you were saying to use the letter. You said letter. Yeah. Just I found that very confusing. I hope you work on that choice
please,
of.
I'd like to
Yeah.
know. You say it's confusing?
Yeah, because there's so many possible things. What that would mean? Do you mean a written form? Do you mean it has to?
Okay, that's a great comment. So let me, Kwang, can you give me a quick answer, or Amma give me a quick answer? I translate would and wu, okay, as later and force. Okay, in the meaning, I think that means good cup, bad cup. Okay, so that's the meaning. So I try to find the right thing. So I do letters. Okay, and I know some translation call it the culture, but I think that's wrong. So anybody, especially who knows Chinese, please give me the suggestion. And thank you, David. For me, it's confused you. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I dropped one into the chat, and this is a word that has vexed us in the past because it can be used to mean like civilization, but I think letter also attaches to it. There is this idea that the culture and civilization capable of reading and writing and recording their history is cultured, is civilization. And so I do think that that idea of using letter is in keeping with the Sun Tzu being fa, that fa idea of the method or regulation or rule of how to conduct military affairs.
Well, one thing I might think about is the words. Instead of use later, I use word and the force, right? That's another way to think about it. And then I know Eno, okay, Eno didn't translate, Dr. Eno didn't translate Art of War. He translated Mencius and the Analects. But this word he translated as a pattern, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so which I disagree, okay? I didn't get it. So, you know, that's why, you know, I still struggle on this word, but, you know, yeah.
But Jason, if I may, I don't think that it's a bad thing that you use the word, the letter for one, okay, in a certain circumstances. And I would like to give one example coming from the Western literature. First, I think it's very good that it causes a certain confusion because it means that people are becoming aware that Chinese is a complex language having many layers of understanding for the same character. And the example that I would like to offer coming from the Western tradition is the word logos, okay? Logos is in the situation quite resembling to one because logos at the first layer of meaning can simply mean a word. But logos can also mean the structure, the pattern, the way, the high principles, etc. Okay, so one has the same complexity with practically the same layers. So as with any complex language, the context is important. The time when that character has been written is important. And so we are here in the joy of intellectual discussion and of philosophical understanding. And I think it's absolutely normal that people could be confused because we are entering in a true attempt of understanding Chinese civilization through her language.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I probably need I need to go.
Yes, I want to tell everybody that though Jason is leaving, we are going to continue talking behind his back about what we're getting from this, and I'm sure he's going to watch it. So we will continue.
Usually I don't watch it. So
well, Jason, I'm going to talk about your back, so you better watch it.
Okay,
yeah,
so
don't worry, you know, yeah, I don't mind. You know, I think I would be happier without knowing. So
okay, very good, very good. No, but I do want everybody to be able to speak about what they are getting from it, and it will be there on the YouTube. which I will send a snippet to. I will cut this out and I will send it to Jason, saying that this is what we said behind your back. Please watch. All right. So next up is going to be Kwan.
So, Shirin, you just summarize the complaint and then email to me. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. All right. So it's going to be Kwan, Mike, and Carly, and then anybody else who wants to talk about what they're getting from this series. Kwan, what are you getting?
Okay, so I think that there's many things that can be said, but I will limit myself to one major stuff. Okay. The art of war can also be translated as the art of life or the art of living. So I would like to make the following metaphor. We are speaking of the sovereign, of the ministers, and of the officers in a state, since we are speaking of the art of war in the three dimensions of the state, if you want. Okay, the sovereign, the officers, and the man. Well, the metaphor, which is not original, since Confucius used the same metaphor and Plato used the same metaphor, is that the sovereign is the highest part of yourself, and the minister is the average part of yourself, and the execution dimension is the lowest part of yourself, obeying to the officer dimension and the sovereign dimensions. And if you look at the chapters precisely, we already discussed it, but since it takes only 30 seconds, I'm going to repeat that. Chapter 1, 2, 3 are about the sovereign part of yourself, okay, of the part that is asking the question, why? Okay, why am I going to war? Or if we translate the art of war as the art of living, why am I living my life, for example? So that is the art that is that everyone is responsible to develop and ask that kind of question to himself or herself. And the part of the officers of the high command is chapter 4, 5, and 6, concerning the complex notion of shu. Okay, and shu again is composed by three stuff: a ball, a hand, and force. So how you are going to handle the situation as skillfully as possible, imagining the configuration, the structure, the possible ways of attaining your goals. Okay, and the last part, chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, what are the practical operations that you would use, being rooted in awareness and in a stable emotional state, to be capable to observe, to decide, and to act in a practical manner, answering to your why question. So either it's on the personal level or on an organizational level. That book is absolutely useful, and technically it's classified with the FIRE books, meaning principles and the regulations of a specialty, this case principles and regulations of warfare, or even better, the art of the ruler, because in that book it's not only warfare, it's the art of the ruler. Well, that art of the ruler can be used on a collective level or an individual level. So I think it's a universal book. I stop here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kwan. Next up is going to be Mike, followed by Carly. Mike.
Yeah, I have an interesting experience similar to I got from doing the design way with you, Shrikant, Harold Nelson's work. I also got it when I was attending Marissa's poetry meetups, where I'm a teacher myself, and I think it's very, very important that teachers put themselves in situations where their knowledge as compared to the people they're surrounding themselves with is very limited and very small, because it puts you in that beginner's mindset that's extremely important. Because if I'm teaching from my area of expertise, it's very easy for me to forget the students in front of me are not in the same area of expertise that I am. So what I found that 52 Living Ideas does so well, two things. One, similar to Adler's book of how to read a book, this particular style of chapter by chapter, we have Taoist scholars, Chinese scholars. I mean, the history lesson that I'm getting here is just phenomenal. So one, you're getting a whole different perspective of how to read a book. And two, you get a chance to occasionally take a spot that is a bit humbling and at the same time very instructive because it puts you in that beginner's frame of mind. And that's what I'm pulling out. I had read the book several times many years ago from a competitor's standpoint, but what I learned from doing that is just scratch the surface as compared to what I'm learning here. It's a much wider and richer view. I'm really enjoying it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Next up is going to be Carly. Carly, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't have too much more to add other than I am a student, and it's wonderful to get these different teachers' perspectives. I love the dialectic aspect and back and forth. And even when you disagree, you are all far too humble, which is just fantastic. The expertise, and as I said earlier, the depth of the concepts and what I'm able to apply them to, the different metaphors, I really had used it in my art of life, asking why on personal levels. I see the same sort of strategies play out on social levels, as well as obviously business, and then the higher concept of actual war in the state. But this is just phenomenal. So thank you again for all of your input.
Wonderful. All right, folks. So thank you. Thank you so much. And we will see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
Shrikant. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Hi.